So last week we talked about the difference between musicals and non-musicals. I mentioned how The Prince of Egypt is a good example of setting up your musicals. Today I'm going to be making a video just talking about the opening of The Prince of Egypt and explain how amazing it is with setting up your intro. So without further ado, let's just jump in. I just need to mention that I will not be able to actually play in the audio. I will be going through and talking about the music. I will be going through and talking about the music and saying what the words that have been spoken through, because it is important that you understand the words, but I can't actually break down. I can't actually play the audio. So I'm going to be explaining what's happening in the scenes, and I'm going to be telling you what it is saying. Without further ado, let's jump in with just the opening, right? It opens with, you see Egypt, you see the glory of Egypt, right? And then you see the slaves. So you hear voiceovers saying, mud, sand, water, straw. And then you hear the Egyptians saying, faster, mud, and lift, sand, water, and raise up straw. And then the Egyptians say, faster. And you see through this whole time they're whipping the Jews as they are trying to do this work. And the music really starts now. And you hear the Israelites saying, with the sting of the whip on my shoulders, with the salt of my sweat on my brow. Elohim, God on high, can you hear your people cry? Help us now, this dark hour. So in this opening, right, you see how the slaves are treating them. You see how they're whipping them. They're overworking them. These commands that they're giving them are going faster, right? They're you can hear them saying at the first part, right? They're doing the sand, they're doing the rocks, they're doing all that stuff. And even with all that, the Egyptians are still you can see them hard working. And you can see that the Egyptians are still not caring. They're just whipping them and saying, just faster, always go faster. You always have to go faster. The fact of the matter is that for somewhat, the Egyptians' empire was built off of slaves. So they had to continue making these people work really, really hard to make these giant temples and all. A little misunderstanding a lot of people think is that the slaves built the pyramids. They would not have built the pyramids for the reason that, this is a little knowledge, Egyptian knowledge for you guys. They would not have built the pyramids because the Egyptians believed that the pyramids were a sacred thing for their Pharaoh, their god on earth to lay to rest in. So they would not have had the filth of the slave hands working on that. So they had them working on other things, not actually on the pyramids. That's just a little knowledge for you guys, because they believed that the Pharaoh was a god, so they wouldn't have had the filth of a slave working on those. Anyway, so back on. So yeah, you see how they were treating them terribly, right? And then you hear the music starting, and you hear them saying about how the pain on their shoulders of the whips, how they're constantly always sweating in this hot sun, and then you just hear them crying out for their God, please just save us now. We're in our darkest place. Can you please just, deliver us? The name of the song, deliver us. So which is the next line, deliver us. Hear our cry, deliver us. O Lord of all, remember us. Here in this burning sand, deliver us. They're crying out to God, please just hear us. Please just see the suffering we're going through. At this point, some of them are just praying it because they're just or just going to continue praying it. But the fact matters, they have given up hope. They have been slaves for years now. There's no hope for them. And some of them are just holding out hope and just saying, deliver us. But most of them are just crying out to God in the way of we're just going to continue crying out. We're going to complain to him. But they actually don't think that he's seeing them. He's seeing them through all this. He's watching them. He's protecting them through this all. So then after so that you hear them crying out, you mean this burning sand, just deliver us, remember us. They believe that he has forgotten them. He has abandoned them now. Give us the land you promised us. Deliver us to the promised land. Now this comes from the whole part where Abraham was, where God promised Abraham land, like this land for them. And as we all know, later on, when Moses comes, for those who know the Bible, know that God's promised land is coming with Moses, and he's going to lead them out of Egypt into the promise. So some of this is foreshadowing, they're praying out to God to give us some our own land, give us what you promised us. And for this whole time, God is doing that. He's laying it out because Moses is about to come, which leads us into the next part where you see now Moses' mother saying, which translates to, my good and tender son, do not be afraid, do not be scared. Then we lead into the next phrase that she says after that, my son, I have nothing I can give but this chance that you may live. I pray we meet again, if you will. And then it goes back into deliver us part. But what we learn from this part is, first of all, my son, I won't be able to save you, but I might be able to give you a chance to live. And I might not make it through, but hopefully you can. So this is right before she brings him down to the water and sends him in the basket that leads him down the Nile River. And eventually we know he comes upon the princess of Egypt, and she raises him. So then we go back into, deliver us. Hear our prayer, deliver us. From this despair, these years of slavery, there's a land you promised us. Deliver us from these bonds, and deliver us to the promised land. So again, the promised land comes back. They're asking for the promised land. They're asking him deliver them from the slavery that he has them in. And through this whole time, you see more shots of, in this case, you see the Egyptian armies going down and killing a bunch of, babies. This is something that happened in the Bible. They were afraid that the Israelites were getting too big, and that they would have to kill them off. They would have to, conquer them. They would have to kill off the new age, because they were going to get too big, and they were going to overthrow them soon. So they killed off all the baby boys so that they didn't have an army to raise up. So that's why Moses was sent in a basket away, because his mother wanted to, save him from this death that was coming. So you see them going through and just killing all these children. For anyone who thinks this is just a kid's movie, that's really, really dark for being a kid's movie. And we cut back to his mother at the river and all, and she's putting him in the water and singing this, hush down, my baby, be still now, don't cry. Sleep as you're rocked by the stream. Sleep and remember my last lullaby, so that I will be with you when you dream. Very sweet little phrase that, honestly, that part of the song is one of the greatest, sweet little lullabies that you could sing to your little child. It's very, very sweet, but also, she's given, as we see in the next line, she's had to let him go and allow the stream to, take him where he's supposed to be. And she's just, it's going to come back later in the story. One of the things she says is, as she's singing that, she says, remember this last lullaby that I sang to you. And later on in the movie, we see that he actually does remember it, and he's humming it, because even that he was a baby and all, there was something that stuck in his head about that lullaby that's really sweet. Then when the next line goes, river, oh river, flow gently for me. Such precious cargo you bear. Do you know of somewhere where he can live free? River, deliver him there. So again, right? She's trusting the river, river, flow gently. Take him to a spot where he will be safe, where he will be able to be free. Save my little boy. Keep him safe. And the river doesn't do a great job at this. As we see in the end, yes, you see him go into the bathing area of the daughter of the Pharaoh, the princess of Egypt. And you see how, she decides to raise the child now. Then, through this time, the older sister of Moses is watching this. And you hear her say now, "Brother, you're safe now, and safe shall you stay. For you, I have a prayer just for you. Grow up, baby brother. Come back someday. Come and deliver us too." So you see, now, what she's seeing in this moment is where the river took him was to Egypt. Where the river took him was to the highest people in Egypt, the people who can actually make a difference. So in this moment, Moses' mother was just like, take him away from Egypt, take him to somewhere safe where he will be. And then when her sister, even how little she was, when she saw that where the river took him, she realized God had a bigger plan for Moses. And so that's why she says, "Grow up, baby brother, come back someday, and come and deliver us too." Because she now knew that God had a plan for him, that he was going to be the one to deliver them now. That God had gave him a special gift. I think the idea that she was trying to get, where she was thinking was, hey, he's now up in royalty, he will be able to, influence, and they allow them to let the slaves go. Is that what happens? No. But that's probably where she was coming from, where she was just thinking, oh, he will be able to raise up, and the Pharaoh will trust him, and probably be his own brother, and he will be able to, he will be able to convince the Pharaoh to let him go. The Pharaoh will be his father, then his brother. He will actually have this closeness to, he's a part of the royal family now. He's a part of the high ups, the royalty of Egypt. So that's where she's coming from. It's like, oh yeah, you will actually be able to deliver us. So then the next line perfectly shows us, right? Where is the foreshadowing of what they want. And it cuts back to a long shot, and you see the slaves and all, and you hear it, and you hear the music from the slaves again now. Deliver us. Send a shepherd to shepherd us. Deliver us to the promised land. Deliver us to the promised land. Deliver us. Right? Now, they're saying, send a shepherd to show us to the promised land. Send a shepherd to shepherd us there. And it's perfectly, it's in the movie, it's showing that the music is saying that the sister has just figured out that, hey, he's going to be the one who is going to help deliver us. So she's realizing that he's going to be in a special place. He's in a special place now, and that he will be able to help deliver them. And now the slaves and all are now also saying, they're changing their prayer up a little bit, and now it's just saying, send a shepherd, send someone to save us. And so it's perfectly setting up what's going to happen later on in the story, where Moses is going to come back again, and he's going to shepherd them out of there into the promised land. Technically, he never gets to actually go to the promised land because of the whole thing that happens in the desert, but that's a whole different story. That's not the story we're actually talking about. But you get the point, that it's perfectly set up in this one opening song. What's the story going to be about? What, you're not really introduced too much to the main character because he's just a baby, but you are introduced to what's going on, what's the plot, what's the story that behind this, what's going to happen in this movie. It's a very beautiful song. I wish I could play the song, but I was able to, read off what the lyrics of the song was. Of course, it wasn't as incredible when I read it off to you guys as it is when it's actually sung. But overall, I think you get the point. Anyways, guys, so what can we learn on this, on how to set up your, story? As we talked about in our recap for this week, about how to set up and plot, we really set up the plot of what's going on in the story, what's the story going to be about. From the very opening, you see the suffering of these people, you see how they're being treated, and then it cuts away to, hey, wow, they are in doubt, and they're screaming out, deliver us, but they're not screaming out in a way that's just They know that he's going to deliver them. They're screaming out in a way. At that point, they're like, more like, we have given up hope. We're just singing this because, and we're more just mocking God almost. And through that, God is already, through this torment, this terrible thing, it's really interesting how God used the terrible times, 2 times where 2 great people came out of. Number 1, Moses, all the Israelite babies in Egypt were killed. Number 2, all of the boys, baby boys, from the ages of 0 to 2 were killed at the birth of Jesus, at the time when Jesus was only like a little baby. Not quite an infant anymore, but Moses, who delivered them from Egypt, who delivered them from the slavery of Egypt. And then we had Jesus, who delivers us from the slavery of sin. He conquered over sin and death on the cross. I'm not going to go to, this is not a channel talking about, all the symbolism behind stuff, but I just want to mention, the importance of what we see there, right? 2 different times that God used slavery. He used a terrible occurrence like, all these little babies getting slaughtered to raise up a mighty savior. You get the point. He rose up as savior for us, and then he rose up as savior for the Israelites who were in slavery. Both cases. Now, of course, Moses is nowhere close to being Jesus' lover, but you get the point. God uses some terrible moments to find victory for him. Anyways, guys, so what we learn from this on how to set up a story? We learned up how to set up. It really caught everyone's attention. Most people who have got through this, most people who've watched it have watched the movie all the way through, because this opening it does not bore your audience one bit. It's very fast-paced, but also in the way that it's not so fast-paced that it's just like boom, boom, boom. But it's getting a lot done in a short amount of time, and you understand where are these slaves, where are the Israelites at right now, what are they dealing with, what are the Egyptians like? They are literally killing little babies. They're forcing all this manual labor on these people, like whipping them until they you see some of them almost dying on it, and they don't care. So you see that, and then you set up a really you really set up the world. You see how Egypt is, and this is where we're going to spend the whole movie. It's not until the very end of the movie that we see the exit out of Egypt, and we really get to see these people, and really get to see what Egypt is like, all the terrible things about Egypt. And then you set up the main character. You see how where he's going to grow up, where you don't really set up what his personality is like or anything like that, because he's a baby, but you really get to understand who this character is, what is he going to do in this story. So guys, this is a really good opening. I could talk about this for hours, but I'm going to keep it more brief. Tell me your thoughts below on, do you guys like the Prince of Egypt? Do you guys like this opening? Do you guys agree with me on any of these stuff? Tell me your thoughts below. If you guys haven't yet, please subscribe. This has been the Movie Night Reviewer, Peter Wary, signing off.